Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. The Trump administration says it has run out of space to process thousands of migrants crossing the southern border. This week, the Border Patrol started flying undocumented immigrants from facilities in Texas to San Diego. Officials in Florida said Thursday they were informed by Border Patrol that hundreds would soon be transported to the Miami area. Border Patrol officials had also said the administration was considering moving them to Detroit and Buffalo. But late last night, Customs and Border Patrol disputed that in a statement. Quote, contrary to inaccurate reports in the press, CBP has no plans to transport people in our custody to northern or coastal border facilities, which include Border Patrol stations in Florida. We begin today with the Acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Kevin McAleenan, who also serves as the Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Welcome to the program.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So first off, we're hoping you can clarify this policy. On Thursday, this is what we heard from the sheriff in Palm Beach County.
Earlier this week, the chief of Border Patrol operations out of Miami informed us that their intentions were to bring about 1,000 people every month up into the Broward and Palm Beach County area, 500 to each county, and that these people were going to be brought from the El Paso area that have crossed the border illegally.
Is this still being considered in Florida?
So let me tell you what's happening on the border. We're seeing 4,000 families a day and single adults, unaccompanied children crossing unlawfully between ports of entry. That means CBP right now in Border Patrol stations and at ports of entry has about 16,000 people in custody. The system is full. We've been very clear about that. So what we're trying to do is plan to be able to manage that capacity safely to bring people where we can process them efficiently. As you noted, flights have gone on to San Diego where there's a high capacity Border Patrol sector. And as a planning factor, we're looking at all options for being able to detain people. But frankly, I respect the sheriff's concerns. Governor DeSantis, Senator Rubio, communities all over this country are extremely generous, but they're not ready to receive this flood of immigration. We need to have a system that works at the border. We're able to prevent people from crossing unlawfully and return them effectively, and that's why we've asked Congress for help.
So, to be clear, is Florida still being considered?
No. We're using the southwest border sectors for additional capacity.
And it will not be in the future?
No, I don't believe so. We're working with Secretary of Defense to increase our capacity for facilities right now. We're also working with Mexico to make sure that people can wait in Mexico for their hearings as well. So we're going to be focusing on those options.
So can you explain what changed? We laid out the timeline there.
Right.
On Thursday, local officials are told by your agency that this is happening. This morning you tell me it's not.
It's not, because we looked at it from a planning perspective. What's prudent here? We do have stations in Florida. We have stations on the northern border. They're very small stations. They have a few agents that are busy patrolling their areas. It wasn't going to be an effective use of resources. But yeah, we had to look at all options. When you have 16,000 people in custody and facilities designed for many fewer, you've got to look at any planning factor you can.
And so, to be clear, because in that statement that we read, it was blamed on inaccurate reports in the media.
So the reports in the media were that flights had already occurred. Those were not accurate.
So that's the part that you're saying the media was inaccurate on.
Correct.
That flights had already occurred.
Correct.
But you acknowledge that they were officials from your own agency who said that this was indeed going to happen in Florida.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection
Detroit,
did notify,
Buffalo, and Miami.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection did notify officials locally in those areas that they were looking at the possibility of doing this. That's correct.
Okay, and those cities are also off the table now?
Correct.
Okay. And this decision was made when?
The commissioner, the acting commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection made that decision.
Yesterday?
Yes.
Okay. So those communities now will no longer be expected to take in some of the migrants that you say are overwhelming facilities on the border.
That's right. But I think we should really stay focused on what's actually happening on the border. It's a border security and a humanitarian crisis. These flows are unprecedented. They're creating dramatic challenges for law enforcement professionals trying to manage it. But we also are talking about a situation where children are at risk, where children are being smuggled, where children are in the hands of some of the most violent criminal organizations in this hemisphere. And we haven't had a solution from Congress to stop that. The administration's put forward 3 approaches this last 2 weeks. A supplemental to help us manage it, $4.5 billion, so we can create the facilities to protect children in custody and provide medical care, provide the processing, and provide effective repatriation for those that don't have a right to stay in the U.S. We've worked on an emergency approach that would address the 2 key drivers of this crisis, the pull factors for families and the pull factors for unaccompanied children. That's the Chairman Graham bill that was introduced on Wednesday. And then, of course, in your open, you had the president talking about the more comprehensive immigration approach that would reform the legal system as well as address those vulnerabilities in the unlawful crossings.
But in the immediate sense, you're saying that there's a crisis at the border of almost 100,000 a month.
Correct.
What happens to these people now that you're not putting them in other detention facilities elsewhere in the country?
So we've improved our processing. We're working with the Secretary of Defense to add additional facilities in the border area for single adults. That will allow us to increase our ability to hold people safely. We're building soft-sided facilities for families for their processing so that they have more space and a more appropriate setting.
Well, that takes
time. We're doing all these things simultaneously. We're in the 2 to 3 weeks out from doing those. In the meantime, we are moving people to sectors that have higher capacity, like San Diego, as you noted.
And in that 2 to 3 week period, you said, well, what are the standards going to be like in these facilities? I know you've raised concern about being able to provide for the welfare of these people.
I've been raising concern since last June about the border security and humanitarian crisis. We went to the border in March and had a press conference when we were over 14,000 in custody. We're now over 16,000 in custody. So yes, I'm very concerned about the conditions. These are not appropriate facilities for families and children in particular. These are police stations built for single adults, and that's why we've asked Congress for more resources to address it.
You've asked for the $4.5 billion that you said there.
Correct.
What's driving this wave of immigration?
Yeah. So the number one factor driving this are the pull factors in our system. The vulnerabilities in our legal framework that tell a family that you'll be allowed to stay, you'll be released and allowed to stay, that tell an unaccompanied child that you'll be able to join your family here, a parent who might already be here unlawfully. We need to change that dynamic. We need to change it quickly. The other main factor is that there are challenging situations in Central America. There's poverty and economic opportunity gaps that are stark, and we need to work on both sides of that problem. In Central America, with Capitol Hill to change our legal framework, and on the border where we're increasing security significantly, both through additional border barrier, partnering with the Department of Defense, and adding agents and officers and technology.
Have you then told the president that you disagree with his suggestion to cut foreign aid to those 3 main countries?
The president's looking for accountable partners and programs that have a return on investment for American interests. I think if we can find those programs that are working, that are addressing the push factors for migration, I think we're going to be able to continue to partner. I'm going to be down there in 2 weeks in Central America, working with my counterparts at the Ministry of Interior and Public Safety level, talking about increasing border security on the Guatemala-Honduran border, on the Guatemalan-Mexican border, starting at the source of origin with the smugglers that are enticing people into this cycle to address their security concerns.
Back to what Americans can expect to be happening in their communities. The president has said on at least 3 different occasions, as recently as April 27th, that he wants to ship migrants into sanctuary cities. This has injected this idea of politics into this. This came from the president himself. Let's listen.
Now, we're sending many of them to sanctuary cities. Thank you very much. They're not too happy about it. I'm proud to tell you that was actually my sick idea.
Do you support that?
So as we've already talked about, we are balancing operationally the processing of people at the border. We have sent flights to California. California is a sanctuary state by law, so that's technically correct. The other part is that the 10 of the top 11 destinations for immigrants that are released in the U.S., they're going to sanctuary cities because that's a magnet. They're providing an incentive to come live in those areas, and that's what's happening.
But your agency transporting people to these cities,
Our transportation is based on operational necessity, capacity to process safely. That's what we're doing.
So no is the answer to the question. Okay. So when the president speaks about all of these immigration changes, I know you are frustrated that there is not more immediacy in terms of Congress actually acting. When the president went to the Rose Garden, though, a lot of what he laid out was about legal immigration, and it requires Congress to comply and to be a partner. There was really no outreach to concerns Democrats have about things like DACA protections and the like. How do you get Congress to do what you're asking them?
So first of all, the president in the Rose Garden made a clear distinction between this broader effort that's going to take some time working with Congress and the immediate bill that he's asked for. He referenced Chairman Graham, Judiciary Committee in the Senate, his approach that's on the table right now, targeting the two main drivers for this flow. So that's out there. That's ready to be negotiated and hopefully passed. We also have asked for the supplemental 2 weeks ago. There's a lot of money that we need right now to take care of people that are crossing the border appropriately and make sure we're repatriating those that don't have a right to stay in the U.S. We need Congress's help for both of those right now.
Right. But the $4.5 billion you're saying you need right now. The rest is an ideal. You've got an incredibly difficult job on one of the most emotionally fraught issues there is. The Washington Post reported that you had threatened to quit because of a knife fight over immigration with hardliner Stephen Miller. Does you being here today mean you won that fight?
Look, I'm not going to talk about rumors or any alleged internal conversations. What I see is a cabinet team that's pulling in the same direction to make this crisis mitigated. I'm working with the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, Health and Human Services Secretary. I met with all of them in the first several weeks. The White House is supporting our initiatives. We have a robust strategy of action. We've put forward a legislative component. We've changed our dynamic at the border with increasing MPP, with prosecuting child smugglers at the border. We're moving out. We're acting with a lot of support from the White House and the cabinet. I'm not worried about alleged internal conversations.
So you didn't threaten to quit?
I did not threaten to quit, no.
You will still be the person trying to lead this charge?
I'm going to work on solving this problem as long as I have that opportunity, no question.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in and for underscoring the immediacy of this.